The morning sun rose gently over the dusty plains of Montana, painting long streaks of gold across the open land. The town of Red River Creek came alive with the sound of horses, hammering, and chatter. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and everyone had a story to tell. But that day, a story began that would be whispered for years to come. James Caldwell, a quiet rancher in his 40s, had lived most of his life on the outskirts of town. He wasn't a man of many words, but he had the kind of eyes that saw everything, the kind of man whose silence spoke louder than others shouting. After his wife passed away 5 years earlier, James had poured his life into his land. Cattle, horses, fences, and solitude became his world. He didn't invite many people in, but he did need help running the place. That's when the sheriff's wife introduced him to a woman named Clara and her little girl, Mary. They were new to town, quiet and polite. Clara had offered to cook and help around the ranch in exchange for a roof over their heads and a modest wage. James didn't hesitate. He needed a cook, and something in Clara's tired eyes made him say yes before she could even finish her offer. From the first day, she kept the house spotless. The aroma of hot biscuits and coffee filled the mornings again. Mary, the girl, couldn't have been more than 8. She was shy, always clutching her mother's apron, rarely speaking above a whisper. Weeks passed peacefully. James began to enjoy hearing laughter echoing through the house again, even if it was faint and careful. He found himself watching the little girl feed the chickens, or seeing Clara hang laundry by the porch with a kind of quiet grace that only someone who had known pain could carry. One evening, while the wind howled across the fields, James noticed something. Clara was setting the table, her sleeves rolled up slightly, and for just a second, he caught sight of dark bruises along her wrist. She noticed his eyes flicker to them and quickly pulled her sleeve down. He didn't say a word, but the image burned in his mind. The next morning, he caught sight of little Mary limping slightly as she carried a pail of water from the well. He walked toward her gently. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked. Mary froze. Her eyes darted to the house, as if making sure her mother wasn't watching. "I'm fine, Mr. Caldwell," she said quickly, forcing a smile. He knelt beside her. "That's a heavy bucket," he said. "You shouldn't be doing that alone." He took it from her hands, his eyes catching another bruise, this one near her elbow. That night, as James sat by the fireplace, his jaw tightened. He had seen marks like that before. Not on a woman or child, but on soldiers, on men beaten down by others stronger than them. He thought about asking, but he knew enough about pride and fear to understand that sometimes people only spoke when they were ready. Days turned into weeks. Clara cooked, cleaned, and smiled politely, but something in her manner remained tense. Every time a man rode by the ranch road, she'd look up sharply. Every time a horse whinnied near the gate, Mary would run inside. It wasn't until a cold evening in early December that the truth began to surface. James had been in town for supplies when he overheard a conversation between 2 drunk cowhands outside the saloon. "Ain't that the woman from the Wilson farm?" one said. "Her husband's still looking for her, I heard." "Yeah," the other replied, spitting into the dirt. "Mean bastard, that one. Used to work the rail yard. Beat her senseless more than once, they say. Heard she ran off in the middle of the night." James froze. His hand tightened around the feed sack he was carrying. He rode home faster than he'd ever ridden before. When he arrived, he found Clara on the porch, holding Mary close. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide. "He's here," she whispered, trembling. "Tom's here." James looked over his shoulder and saw a man riding up the hill, tall, broad, and drunk. His voice echoed across the yard. "Clara, you think you can hide from me on some stranger's land?" Mary began to cry. Clara held her close. James stepped forward, his boots crunching the frozen dirt. "You're trespassing," he said calmly. Tom sneered, his eyes bloodshot. "This is between me and my wife. Stay out of it. She's not your property," James said evenly. Tom dismounted, stumbling slightly, the smell of whiskey thick on his breath. "You got no idea who you're talking to, old man." He raised his hand as if to shove past James, but before he could, James caught his wrist and twisted it behind his back, forcing him to his knees in the dirt. Tom howled in pain, cursing. "You'll regret this." James leaned down close to his ear. "You've done enough regrettable things. Now get off my land." Tom spat in the dirt, glared at Clara, then stumbled back to his horse. "This ain't over," he growled. "I'll be back for what's mine." James stood there, watching him ride away, until he disappeared into the dark. Clara fell to her knees, sobbing. Mary clung to her. James crouched beside them, unsure what to say. "He won't hurt you again," he said softly. "Not while you're under my roof." That night, he stayed awake by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the road. But Tom didn't come back that night. Not the next day either. Still, the fear in Clara's eyes didn't fade. She jumped at every sound, flinched at every loud voice. It tore at James's heart to see. He decided to do something. The next morning, he rode into town and went straight to the sheriff. "Tom Wilson," he said. "He's in Red River County again. He came onto my land threatening his wife and child." The sheriff, a stout man with kind eyes, sighed. "James, you know how it is. Unless he lays a hand on someone or she files a formal complaint, my hands are tied." "She's scared," James said. "You think she's gonna walk into your office with that man hunting her?" The sheriff leaned back. "I'll keep an eye out. But be careful, James. That man's got a temper. You get in his way, he'll come for you too." James tipped his hat. Let him try. He rode home, determined. For the next few days, things settled. Clara began to smile again, just a little. Mary even laughed once while feeding the chickens. The sound of that laughter made James realize how long it had been since the house had felt alive. But peace doesn't last long in a town where violence hides behind closed doors. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, James noticed movement near the barn. He stepped outside quietly, hand resting on the handle of his revolver. Then he saw him, Tom Wilson, creeping toward the back door, a bottle in one hand, something metallic glinting in the other. James didn't think twice. "Stop right there," he barked. Tom froze, then turned slowly, grinning. "Didn't I tell you this wasn't over?" James raised his gun. "You're not setting foot inside that house." Tom laughed, a cruel, slurred sound. "You think she's yours now? You think you can keep what's mine?" "She's not a thing to keep," James said. "She's a woman who deserves peace. You can leave now, or you can leave in the back of a wagon." Tom's face twisted in rage. He lunged forward, knife flashing. James fired once. The sound echoed across the fields. Tom staggered back, the knife clattering from his hand. He fell to the ground, clutching his leg. Clara appeared in the doorway, screaming, "James!" He lowered his gun slowly. "He's alive," he said, "but he won't be walking for a while." The sheriff arrived an hour later. He looked down at the wounded man, then at James. "He broke into your property armed. That's self-defense," he said quietly. "I'll have him in a cell by morning." Tom Wilson never returned to Red River Creek after that night. For a while, the town whispered about what happened. Some called James a hero, others said he should have minded his own business. But the ones who really knew him, who saw Clara and Mary's faces after, knew the truth. He hadn't done it for pride. He'd done it because someone had to. Months passed. Winter melted into spring. Life returned to the ranch, steady and calm. Clara's bruises faded. Mary's laughter filled the yard like birdsong. James tried not to think about what he felt when he looked at Clara. She was younger, yes, but strong, stronger than most men he'd known. And kind. She'd thank him every day for what he'd done, and every day he'd tell her she didn't owe him a thing. One day, he came in from the fields to find her sitting on the porch, sewing. She looked up, smiling softly. "You work too hard, Mr. Caldwell," he chuckled, "and you cook too well. Can't have both." She laughed quietly, and for a moment, their eyes met, a long, silent understanding between two people who had seen too much loss but still found warmth in the same place. That night, as he was locking the barn, Mary ran out with a drawing in her hand. "Mr. Caldwell," she called. He knelt down as she handed him the paper. It was a crude drawing, a stick figure man with a hat, a woman with long hair, and a little girl holding both their hands. "That's you, Mama, and me," she said proudly. "We're a family." James felt his throat tighten. He smiled and patted her hair. "That's the best thing I've ever been given, Mary." Years went by. Red River Creek changed. The railroad expanded, new families moved in, old faces passed on. But one story never faded, the story of the quiet rancher who took in a broken woman and her child, stood against the man who hurt them, and gave them back their peace. People in town would sometimes see them together, Clara laughing with James at the market, Mary riding a pony beside him, her hair flying in the wind. When the preacher married them a few years later, the whole town turned up. Even the sheriff, standing at the back with a proud smile. As they exchanged vows, James looked at Clara, not as someone he had saved, but as someone who had saved him in return. He had lived half his life alone, thinking love had left him for good. But there she was, standing in the golden light, her hand trembling slightly in his. When they left the church, the sun was setting over Red River Creek again, just as it had that first morning. But now the world felt different, warmer, safer. Clara and Mary had found their home, and James had found his heart again. And though the town went on to see many stories, wars, floods, harvests, births, they never forgot the day James Caldwell stood between a cruel man and two souls who needed saving. Because in that moment, he didn't just protect them, he reminded everyone that courage isn't about fighting, it's about standing when no one else will. And that's the story Red River Creek never forgot.